1948, Dearborn, Michigan, and Ford has a problem. General Motors is selling 5 brands, Chevrolet at the bottom, then Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and Cadillac at the top. A ladder every American family can climb as their paycheck grows, and Ford only has 3 rungs: Ford, Mercury, Lincoln, with a wide-open gap in the middle where GM's mid-price buyers live, and Ford has almost nothing to sell them. So 2 Ford men, Louis Crusoe and Richard Crava, start sketching a brand-new car to plug that gap. They call it the E-car, and the company's executive vice president Ernest Breech, essentially the project's real father inside the boardroom, convinces Ford's top management that an upscale mid-size car is the answer, based on early 50s research and a booming economy. And for the next 7 years, this project grows. Thousands of buyer surveys, focus groups, an entire brand-new division created in 1955 just to bring one car to life. Ford even hires the poet Marianne Moore to help brainstorm names. And she comes back with genuinely strange suggestions, names like Utopian Turtletop and Mongoose Civic, all of them rejected. So Ford's own internal committee goes back to the drawing board. They draft a 60-page internal memo just on the procedure for selecting an advertising agency. Interview 19 agencies before finally choosing Foote, Kohn, and Belding. And out of thousands of name candidates, they land on one close to home, Edsel, after Edsel Ford, the founder's own son, dead since 1943. And here's the first gut punch. They welded a beloved family name onto a product that would spend the next 60 years as the industry's go-to synonym for failure. But nobody could see that in 1955. All they saw was money. Medium-price cars were selling fast, so Ford commits $250 million, over $2 billion in today's money, into research, design, and brand-new factories built to produce this car and nothing else, plus $12 million on advertising alone. Teaser campaigns that refused to even show the car for over a year straight, building hype to a fever pitch. And remember what the American car market actually looked like in the mid-1950s. This is the golden age of chrome and tail fins, families upgrading their car almost every year, the same way they'd upgrade a television set. Detroit's Big Three racing each other to build bigger engines and flashier dashboards, and Ford genuinely believes if they time this launch right, in that exact climate, with that exact appetite for something new, they can't lose. And here's the design detail almost nobody talks about. Edsel's design chief Roy Brown originally sketched a slim, narrow vertical grille. Elegant, understated, but Ford's own engineers enlarged it, insisting the slim version couldn't cool the engine properly. And that single engineering decision, made quietly in a meeting room with no customer in sight, created the exact oversized shape that would sink the entire brand. A reminder that a lot of company disasters don't start with a bad idea. They start with a small, reasonable-sounding compromise nobody thought was a big deal at the time. Then, September 4th, 1957, E-Day arrives. The curtain drops on 18 different models across 4 series and 6 body styles built on 2 separate wheelbases. Model names like Citation, Ranger, Pacer, and Villager. And for about 2 weeks, it actually works. 6,500 Edsels delivered on day 1 alone, dealers packed with curious crowds, Ford projecting somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 cars sold in year 1, and on paper the car isn't even bad. The top engine option is a 410 cubic inch V8 rated at 345 horsepower, genuinely quick for 1957. But a fast engine can't save a car nobody wants to be seen driving, and before the public even got their hands on it, Ford had already handed the press an early warning sign nobody caught in time. At the design center, Ford built an entire nightclub just to impress journalists, ran a stunt driving display, then handed the keys of brand-new Edsels to 71 automotive writers to drive straight to their local dealers. And on that drive alone, one car's engine seized after its oil pan fell clean off. Another nearly put its driver into a ditch when the brakes failed completely. And those are the exact stories that ended up in print before a single regular customer had even seen the car in a showroom. And then it falls apart, fast. That enlarged vertical grille gets torn apart by the American public within days, compared to a horse collar, to a toilet seat, to an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon. And once a car becomes a punchline in living rooms across the country, no engineering department can save it. But the grille wasn't even the real killer. Quality control was falling apart on the assembly line itself. Doors that wouldn't shut flush. Hoods that wouldn't latch. Oil pans dropping off mid-drive. Brakes failing on press test units handed straight to journalists. The Teletouch push-button transmission built into the steering wheel hub constantly malfunctioning. And the exact people Ford needed to fall in love with this car went home instead, with stories about a strange-looking machine that broke down on the way to the dealership. And then the final blow, timing. Ford engineered the Edsel for an economy that wanted bigger, flashier, pricier cars every single year. But by late 1957, the United States had slid into a recession, and buyers were suddenly chasing small, cheap, fuel-efficient compacts, the exact opposite of what $250 million had just been spent building. And while Edsel was drowning, look at what General Motors was doing at the exact same time. Pontiac spent almost nothing by comparison, widened its wheel track by 5 inches, called it wide track, sold it hard in the ads, and sold over 360,000 cars in 1959 alone, getting named Motor Trend's Car of the Year, proof the problem was never really the mid-price segment itself. It was Ford's own execution inside it. And the numbers tell the whole story on their own. Year 1 projected 200,000 units. Actual sales barely 68,000. A third of target. Year 2, 1959. Sales drop another 29%. Ford slashes the lineup from 18 models down to 10. Ford's own president, Robert McNamara, a longtime opponent of the entire program, and a man who would go on just a few years later to become the United States Secretary of Defense under President Kennedy, folds Edsel into a new combined Mercury-Edsel-Lincoln division in January of 1959, and dealers who had signed on believing Ford's original sales projections get forced to duel their franchises with Lincoln Mercury, and even Ford of England just to keep their doors open, some of them selling their family homes to cover their franchise debt. Ford tries a pony giveaway promotion tied to the TV Western wagon train, handing out live ponies to anyone who test drove an Edsel, generating headlines but not sales. Then a full primetime special on Ed Sullivan's stage starring Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. An enormous, expensive production, and still nothing moves the needle. And the 1960 model year, meant to be the redemption year, actually looks sharp. Ford strips out the horse collar grille entirely, replaces it with a cleaner hourglass front end. But underneath, it's now almost indistinguishable from a regular 1960 Ford. The lineup gets cut down to just 2 nameplates, Ranger and Villager, and on November 19, 1959, barely 5 weeks into that model year, Ford pulls the plug for good, meaning the 1960 Edsel holds a strange, grim record. It's the only American car in history that was announced dead before its own model year had even finished. Fewer than 3,000 of those 1960 cars were ever built, and in the end, across all 3 model years combined, roughly 118,000 Edsels were built for the American market, with another 7,400 rolling off a Canadian assembly line. 26 months total from E-Day to cancellation. A total financial loss somewhere between $250 and $350 million, Ford's own net income per share collapsing from $5.40 in 1957 down to $2.12 in 1958. Roughly $3,200 lost on every single car sold, and real people paid the human price. Small-town dealers who sank their entire life savings into an Edsel franchise went bankrupt within 2 years. Engineers who spent a decade of their careers on one car watched it get cancelled before some of them even finished paying off their own mortgages. And Time magazine, writing about the collapse in real time, called it flatly, a textbook demonstration of the limits of market research, no matter how much data you collect. And for the next 6 decades, the word Edsel itself stopped meaning car altogether and became business school shorthand for expensive, humiliating failure. The go-to warning story anytime an executive gets too confident in a spreadsheet. Decades later, when Sony's Betamax lost the videotape format war, journalists reached for exactly one word to describe it: Edsel. That's how deep this single car buried itself into the American language. Not as a product, as a punchline. But here's the twist almost. Nobody puts at the end of this story. When Ford shut the Edsel line down, they didn't demolish the brand new $100 million factories built specifically for it. They repurposed those exact assembly lines to build a small, cheap, practical car called the Falcon. Precisely what the American market had been begging for the entire time, and the Falcon became a genuine hit through the early 60s, selling well over 1 million units in its first few years alone. Proof positive that the compact car theory Ford's own recession-era buyers had been signaling all along was correct. And Ford didn't stop there. The same factories also birthed the Comet, a compact sold through the leftover Mercury Edsel Lincoln dealer network to help those same struggling dealers recover some of what they'd lost. And then, in April of 1964, off that very same Falcon platform, Henry Ford II personally unveils a brand new 2-door coupe at the World's Fair in New York. Ford's own executives conservatively forecast 100,000 units in year 1. On the very first day alone, they take 22,000 orders. Within 18 months, they sell over 1 million. That car was the Mustang, one of the single greatest commercial successes in the entire history of the automobile. An entire vehicle segment, the pony car, would eventually be named after it. A segment that would go on to define an entire generation of American performance cars for the next 60 years. And none of it exists without the assembly lines, the tooling, and the hard lessons Ford paid $250 million to learn from its biggest failure. So the Edsel was never really the end of anything. It was $250 million of tuition Ford paid to finally learn what American drivers actually wanted. And every time a modern brand launches something that flops just as loudly, New Coke in the 80s, Google Glass more recently, some journalist somewhere still reaches back 70 years and calls it another Edsel, proof that this one car, built to honor a dead man's name, ended up outliving almost every other product story from its entire era. And that's the number worth remembering long after this video ends. Not the car that failed, but the price a company was willing to pay to finally get it right. And the next time somebody tells you a mistake is unforgivable, remember, there's a factory floor in Michigan that once built the worst car in American history and, only a few years later, without moving a single machine, built the best-selling sports coupe of its era right on top of it.